All right. Welcome. Thank you guys for coming tonight. My name is Dr. Stacy Gaines with Essentially His Wisdom, and I help people find and safely use natural solutions for their everyday health needs. So tonight we're going to talk about our emotions, and in particular, negative emotions that we experience. We're going to talk a lot about stress and how we can really use essential oils to help us cope with those emotions naturally. So to start off, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so that you can see my lovely PowerPoint. Plus I have some notes on here that might help you as we're going through. Oops, too far. There we go. So to start off, I want to give you just a very brief overview of how essential oils support a healthy body chemistry, which then is going to translate into positive emotional responses, and talk just about what are emotions. What are these little things that are in our body and that wreak such havoc at sometimes? So emotions, they're actually very normal. There are normal, healthy responses to life. It's something, it's a way that our body chemistry helps us to make sense of what's happening around us. And so their primary function really is to either move us into action or to help us learn in certain circumstances. So our emotional responses are going to be very crucial to our ability to survive as well as make decisions. And so really, we think about emotions as part of kind of the language of our body. If we really want to understand what our body is telling us, we have to understand what emotions are and what those emotions are communicating to us. So think of emotions as, because they are just basically chemicals in our bodies that carry information. So they carry, or these cells, these information molecules kind of move throughout our bodies. They go from our minds to our organs to other structures, and they basically carry information to help us process what we are experiencing through our five senses. And so as we process this emotional information in our minds and in our hearts, then we also have a third place, which is actually our guts or our digestive tract. And that one can be surprising to some people. But this might make sense here as I talk about it a little bit more. So we have a negative emotional response like stress. Our body is going to kind of feel that response emotionally as well as physically. So how many of you guys have ever had like a super stressful few weeks, and then when it all calmed down, you came down with something? So I remember when we moved from Texas back to Indiana, it was about a 4-week period for when my husband accepted the offer to come to this new job to when we were packed up and heading north on the interstate. So 4 weeks. So I was running on pure adrenaline during those 4 weeks. I was packing, I was getting our house ready to sell, trying to find a new house across the country. At that time, I was still teaching a full load of summer courses. And so the day after we moved in, I came down with this terrible summer cold. And really what it was the stress of moving was just releasing all sorts of chemical hormones throughout my body. And those chemicals were disrupting the natural biochemistry of my body. So at any time that this healthy body chemistry is disrupted, we are going to experience not only emotional byproducts, we're going to feel stress or overwhelm or anxiety and things like that, but we also usually are going to experience physical byproducts. We're going to talk about both of those tonight. So there's a host of oils, of course, that I use to help me through that cold. But what could I have done in the weeks leading up to the move to really help my body better adapt to the stress that it was experiencing? So there's certainly things like sleeping, eating better, exercising, all the things we know that we need to do to create energy and to feel good emotionally as well as physically. But there are some things that we can do in terms of navigating that stress response in our bodies. So think of this as a very complex process, emotions that are going to be involving our brains, so our minds, they're going to be involving our hearts, as well as our guts. And all three of those are communicating with each other with these little information carrying molecules that we call emotions. And so I want to really kind of break this down so hopefully you can understand it in a pretty simplistic manner. So what happens is that we perceive something in our environment, and we kind of interpret our life experiences. And then what happens is we build these neural pathways in our mind based on those life experiences. So these pathways, think of them as like highways of emotional responses. So at a very, very basic level, neurologically, what you can see on the screen here is that we experience something, so some sort of an event. Our amygdala, which is a part of our brain, basically interprets that experience and it elicits an emotional response. So it sends out those chemicals to give your body that emotional response. That emotional response, again, it's just a chemical reaction in our bodies, and that chemical response over time starts to form a habit. Okay, that habit then elicits a physical response, and we then learn from that response by forming some sort of a memory or a belief. Maybe we learn something from that experience so that the next time we're in a similar experience, that cycle kind of starts again, and we just tend to strengthen that pathway or strengthen that highway. Because what happens, we experience something emotionally, have that physical response to it, we form that memory. The next time I'm in that situation or a similar situation, I'm pulling all that information back in. Okay, so through this process, what happens is that we can actually become addicted to this chemical response, this biochemical response that's happening in our body. So, just like an external chemical dependency on something like alcohol or drugs, we can actually become addicted to our emotions, which is a little bit crazy, right? So what happens is we will subconsciously start to engage in creating situations that are going to trigger that negative emotional response because our physical body is craving that particular chemical. Kind of fascinating, but also a little bit crazy and nuts, right? So it's like our wheels kind of get stuck in these ruts of like a well-traveled road, which is just our habitual responses, and we start to feel like we can't control it. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about stress. And I'm going to hone in on stress because it's probably the most common negative emotion that people experience. But you're going to see that there are many emotions that could be inserted here. Any kind of a negative emotion really could be inserted here because the same process from a neurological standpoint is going to be at play. So stress is simply a feeling of either emotional or physical tension. It can come from an event, a thought that makes you feel frustrated or angry or nervous. And basically what stress is, this is healthy. It's something that God gave us as a healthy biological response. It's basically our body's reaction to a challenge or to a demand of some sort. So in very short bursts, stress can be very positive. It can move us into action. It can help me avoid danger or maybe meet a deadline. But if stress builds up and it lasts for an extended period of time, or it's like I have the same short burst day after day after day, we start to see chronic harm to our health. So we're going to see chronic diseases as well as a host of other things that could be associated with stress. If we want to get super scientific, we can define stress as the perceived imbalance of the demands that are placed on you and the resources that you have to meet those demands. So back when I was teaching sports psychology, this was the definition that I made my students memorize when we talked about stress. So I want to focus a little bit on that word perceived. It's all about my individual perceptions of the demands that are placed on me and my individual perceptions of the resources that I have to meet those demands. Okay, so the way that I perceive it is how it's going to affect my body. Somebody else might perceive it completely differently. And that's just the way that stress is going to work. Okay. So demands, these could be things like situations that you're in, tasks that are placed on you, expectations that you feel you have to live up to. Resources could be things like the skills that you have, the time that you have, the amount of energy that you have. So you can see how if our perception of one of these changes, the way that our body reacts to that is also going to change. So I'll give you an example. I'm a mom. One day, I might have all sorts of time and energy to sit and wait for my 6-year-old to eat her dinner. Okay. I don't react negatively. Life is grand. I'm just going to sit here and encourage her along the way, maybe give some consequences, but I'm happy and everything's fine. I don't experience stress from that demand being placed on me. Okay. The next night, however, maybe we're late to church and I've had 16 other stressful situations in that day. And suddenly the resources that I feel that I have to meet that exact same demand of her eating her dinner have depleted. So my reaction is going to be very, very different, right? So the thing to really understand is that even minor stress can have a profound impact on our bodies over time because it starts to build up. So how do we know that we're experiencing stress? There's several emotional indicators and there's several physical indicators. These are basically just ways that our body tells us that we're stressed. So physically, we might feel muscle tension. Usually where we're going to feel it is in our shoulders, our neck, or even in our head. Are the ways that we tend to feel the muscle tension. Some people carry it in their lower back as well, but we tend to see it in the shoulder area the most. We might have either situations where you have a difficulty concentrating on a task, or you're overly alert, like you're hyper alert and hyper aware of what's going on. That can also be a sense of or a time of stress. Headaches, absolutely. And usually what we see is stress and tension headaches are actually linked to the muscle tension in your shoulders. So your shoulders are tense and that is carrying up into your head, giving you the headache. Indigestion, nausea, Remember the three brains that I talked about, our mind brain, our heart brain, and our gut brain. That's our gut brain experiencing that emotion of stress. Rapid breathing, so not being able to get a deep breath. General aches and pains, a lot of times we can link those into stress because of inflammation. Heart palpitations or other heart cardio types of issues. Changes in our eating, changes in our sleeping habits. This is just a very limited list. There's many, many more. If I started to list the chronic diseases that are linked to stress, I can't, because the FDA won't let me. But there are several. If you just do a Google search on stress and chronic disease, there's so many different diseases that are linked or have some sort of a correlation with the incidence of stress in our bodies. So our body, remember, it's sending out those chemical signals. We're also going to have emotional indicators. These are just ways for our body to interpret that physical stress that it's feeling. Okay, so we might feel pressured by people or pressured by a certain circumstance. We might feel depleted or drained or overwhelmed or burdened, anxious, fearful, angry, sad, hopeless. All of these are usually going to be emotional indicators of stress. They're an emotion that we're experiencing, but the root of it is some sort of stress that has been released within our environment. And so we might see noticeable changes in our mood or even our behavior. We could be very, very reactive. We could be withdrawn. We could be indecisive, irritable. That's a common one. Just kind of tearful. I don't know why I'm weepy, but I am. Or lashing out. That typically is going to be linked in with anger or frustration. And usually what we're going to see is people talking about feeling overwhelmed or unsupported or controlled in some way, or maybe angry or frustrated. So these are just general reactions, and they're probably the most common occurrences in terms of the emotional occurrences of stress, and they give us a fairly predictable foundation of what we can expect. But we can also expect just other, like having a multitude of feelings simultaneously. So have you ever had like experiences where you maybe feel threatened, and at the same time you're like angry about the situation, but you're also fearful? So you might have a whole host of different emotions that you're experiencing, but the result is that threat. That's a perceived imbalance of the demand that's placed on you and the resources that you feel like you have to meet that demand. Our physical responses to very different emotions can actually feel very similar. So the example of this could be like, the physical indicator of being terrified or scared is actually pretty close in terms of like your heart rate increases, maybe your respiratory rate increases from being scared and being just super, super excited or exhilarated. So very, very close or very similar types of physical indicators. Same result is a stress. It's a stress response within your body. So in the brain, your brain is experiencing it in the same way. It's basically in context with your own individual experiences and belief. That's going to shape which emotion that you're going to feel and how. So if I have a situation where I had maybe a bad experience with a dog when I was younger, and every time I come across a dog, I kind of experience that same fear. My individual experience is shaping that emotion that I'm feeling. Somebody else is going to have different individual experiences that are going to shape their emotions differently. That's why we all react differently to stress. So let's look at stress in terms of the emotional pathway that I talked about a little bit ago. So that emotional response pathway, we have a stressful experience, okay? Something's happening, some sort of a demand has been placed on us. Our amygdala generally is going to interpret that as a threat. Okay, if it's in a negative stress response. So we start to feel stress, so that emotional piece of I feel overwhelmed, I feel anxious, I feel worried, I feel stressed in some way. We usually just say I feel stressed. The habit starts to form. That's where we start to get addicted to that chemical of the stress being released in our body. Then we have the physical response, because remember what happens is we have the sensory information comes into our brain interprets that information, and then it tells our body how to respond. So if I see my 2-year-old run out into the street, it's not like I have to sit there and tell my body to respond to that happening, right? It's all split second. Information comes into the brain sends information to like send you into overdrive or increase your heart rate or whatever it is that you're going to do. Okay, so that's a physical response. And then we interpret that situation as stressful. So what happens when I get in that situation again, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to stress me out. I'm up against a deadline again. I have to do this again, whatever that situation is. And then the cycle just kind of continues over and over and over again. And our subconscious mind is real tricky and likes to play games with us. And so it will actually start to trick us into certain circumstances because it wants to experience that chemical again. So it's really fascinating. I think this is crazy fascinating. You might not think it's as fascinating as I do, but I think it's great. It's not great that our body feels this way, but the way that it works, I think is great. So what's really amazing is we have these tools that can interrupt that unhealthy kind of highway of crazy, is what I like to call it. And that is in essential oils. So aromas actually have a direct route to where our emotions and where our memories are stored inside of our brains. And so essential oils, through their aromatic properties, basically what they do is trick our subconscious mind. So where that habit or that addiction, for lack of a better word, kind of resides, that essential oil introduces a new positive stimulus that disrupts the entire process. So I like to think of it as like you're going around and around and around in a circle, right? You're kind of going through that circular pattern that we talked about. So you put yourself into stressful situations because you want to get that hit of the chemical, right? And so you're going around and around. You have these old emotional response patterns that maybe you've become addicted to, or at least have become habitual, and you need to create a new one. What that essential oil does is bam, it's like, ooh, this is new information that I now have to insert into this logarithm that's in my brain, or algorithm that's in my brain, and I have to figure out how to process that. So it interrupts that crazy cycle. It interrupts that highway of crazy. So essential oils, beyond that, beyond just the aromatic piece of it kind of interrupting, they also stimulate different and multiple regions of our brain. And so they have a really profound effect on the deepest levels of our emotions. So oils are really powerful because they're going to interact with our emotions on that chemical level. They're going to change our body's chemistry. This is a really, really good thing, especially when we're talking about emotions, because it helps us to feel better and it helps us to feel more in control of our moods. So remember, emotions are simply those molecules that are carrying emotional information to different parts of our body, right? It's taking information that we're receiving from our senses, sending it to our body so it can react in an appropriate manner. This is all happening in like split second fashion. And so our sense of smell, it's so amazing. And I love that we have these incredible oils as tools to help us not only physically, but also emotionally. So what I really want to talk about tonight is one of our newer products. It's called Adaptive. It's a system that's been created basically to, and there we go. I was like, is this not going to work? Hang on. There we go. It's a system that's been created to help our bodies process stress slash negative emotions. Okay, so I'm going to talk about it in terms of stress, but really any negative emotion, Adaptive is going to be helpful for. So this one I think is a game changer for mental health and wellness. Coming from my background in psychology, I love this. Like, it makes me so excited that people have a natural solution that doesn't have all these side effects to start to deal with some of these more kind of mentally related problems. So honestly, I think everybody could use this particular system, but for sure, people who work in a chronic environment with high stress, people who deal with anxiety, people who get frustrated easily, or maybe even lose their composure really easily, people who overthink things, or maybe they're even like compulsive in their decision making. A lack of motivation, feeling fatigued all the time, not being able to like stay on task, or like a lack of focus or concentration. I actually see this as being extremely helpful for overall just brain support, including things like dementia or Alzheimer's. It's not been researched. It's not something that's been attached to this particular system. And I'm not making any kind of a claim in any way, shape, or form, but there's a lot of research that shows a link between low GABA and serotonin, which we're going to talk about here in a second, and these kinds of mental kind of brain disorders. So I really see this as potentially being protective and helpful in terms of that brain support. So let's talk about it. To kind of see how Adaptive works in our bodies, I want to start at just some surface level science of mental wellness. It's a difficult subject because it's a unique experience for each of us. But it also encompasses a lot of different things. There's neurological components, which we talked a little bit about. There's chemical components, so our emotional components, behaviors, thoughts, emotions, all these things come into play when we're looking at how we kind of what kind of mental wellness that we are experiencing. And so we all experience similar challenges in life, but how we deal with those challenges are very unique to each person. Two of the most common kind of responses that people will experience are either overwhelm or sadness. And how we deal with those emotions are very, very challenging. There are some constants in our bodies, and these are just going to be biological processes that we know happen. Usually, what's going to happen is that the chemical, remember, that's just our hormones or our emotions communicating. So the chemical changes that are happening in the body, for the most part, we can predict them. Psychologists have been studying these for decades. We know that there's a neurochemical process that happens where our autonomic nervous system is going to direct the brain to react in a certain situation. Okay, so it's going to tell your brain when your child runs out into the street, it's going to kick your brain into response to tell your body to start moving to go help your child, right? So our autonomic nervous system, it's just an automatic system that happens. We don't have to consciously think about it, all right? So if I see my kiddo running into the street, I don't have to like think to myself, brain, tell my feet to run after my child, tell my mouth to speak, tell my heart to start racing. It all just happens split second automatically. But each of these processes are basically my body releasing chemicals to communicate and tell my body to do all those things. And again, it's happening without us even thinking about it. So as these neurochemicals are released, what happens is our body starts to change physiologically. So that is pretty predictable. We know that happens. It's just an innate response within our bodies by way of our autonomic nervous system and these neurotransmitters that we have in our brains. What's less predictable, however, is how individuals process these changes. So when those emotions, when those chemicals, those emotional chemicals are kind of elicited from our brain, how does the individual process that? Can vary pretty largely from one person to another. So how long it lasts, how intense the feelings are. We know for most people, there's kind of an episodic nature to it. There's some sort of a trigger that brings about that chemical response in the body, and that brings about the physiological changes. And ultimately, the body is designed to resolve those changes and restore balance. Okay, so my kid runs out into the street, all of those chemicals are released from my brain, right? To kick my body into action, that flight or fight kind of response, flight or fight kind of response. But ultimately, my body is designed to resolve that, to bring me back to homeostasis in kind of a balanced state, right? So what happens when that doesn't happen? When the body can't restore that balance? That's when we start to experience those feelings of overwhelm, sadness, anxiety, stress. And a lot of times we might not even be able to explain why we're feeling that way or why we're experiencing what we are. This has become a really major problem in our society. We've become professional stuffers. I can't explain why this is happening, so I'm just going to stuff it down and deal with it later, right? We're really good at that. But there's some really neat research out of Harvard Medical School that tells us that there are millions of different chemical reactions that are occurring in our brains at any given moment. So they hook you up to nice little fMRI machines and look at the different electrical and biochemical responses that are happening within the body. And our body, again, is designed to handle this unless it's not restoring balance. So usually what happens when the body's not restoring balance is there's something wrong with the neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are simply these things in our brain that help our body to deliver and process that information. Okay, so it's basically the way that emotions kind of travel throughout our body. So when we're talking about stress or sadness or overwhelm, it's this little neurotransmitter that's called serotonin. We absolutely need it. Without it, we're going to feel intense sadness, intense overwhelm, depression, all those kind of negative emotional responses generally are linked to low serotonin. That neurotransmitter is not doing its job, or there's not enough of it to do its job. Another piece at play is a different neurotransmitter called GABA. And GABA, what it does is it helps to block different nerve cells in the brain. And it's also linked very strongly to the research in anxiety and mood disorders. When GABA is low, we tend to have low moods. We tend to have high anxiety. We usually don't sleep well. We also have troubles with other hormonal responses in our body. So they could be menstrual, could be thyroid. We even see links of this with ADHD. So GABA is a very important neurotransmitter that our body needs in order to restore balance when those stressful situations happen. We can't control that, right? But we can control how our body is responding to it. So that my child running out into the street, GABA is what's going to step in to lower my heart rate, help me return back to that homeostatic state, that balanced state. So there's a lot of other, I'm overgeneralizing this for the most part. You guys are probably thinking, no, you're not at all, but I'm overgeneralizing it a little bit. And there's definitely other aspects that are at play. There's a point in our brain that's called 5-HT. There's essential fatty acids. There's other brain structure and functional components. But GABA is probably the heaviest studied by major medical research centers, and really known to be a key link in why we see such an increase in our body's inability to deal with stress and overwhelm and sadness and some of these negative emotional responses. So this adaptive system that doTERRA has created, it's relatively new. I'm like completely thrilled by this. I've never seen a supplement like this before. Previously, for people, the only hope has been like deal with it and just face the added stress of having to deal with the stress that you're already facing, right? Or some sort of an SSRI or other pharmaceutical that, while effective, usually has a whole other host of different types of side effects that most of them we don't want to experience. So adaptive has really been designed to directly interact with those neurotransmitters in our brain so that serotonin and GABA can do their job, help to restore balance in our body. So what I love about this particular supplement and line of oils is that it not only tackles that issue of low GABA, but several other things that we know are also important in establishing mental wellness. So they have in the capsules that you see there, there's actually an item or a constituent called scaledium root. And what this does is it helps to support the neurotransmitters, helps to sustain healthy levels of serotonin and GABA. So it helps to keep things in our body the way that they are supposed to be. There's ahi flower, which is really, really rich in omega-3 fatty acids. We know that essential fatty acids are really important for brain health. It just helps support healthy brain functions. There's several oils that are in it that are very high in a constituent called linalool. It's just a compound that's known to help manage stress and sadness and overwhelm. So you're going to see lavender and coriander and wild orange all in that. And doTERRA actually did a study looking at how just diffusing adaptive in an educational environment helped with test anxiety and found some really great results. So what's in this particular line? There's a 15 milliliter oil blend, a 10 milliliter touch roller, and then a supplement. And you can kind of see all three of those on the screen here. The 15 milliliter oil blend is just the adaptive calming blend, and it really is there to target our limbic system. Our limbic system is our sense of smell. It's also our sense of smell is attached to it, but it's our major kind of emotional where we process our emotions in our brain. Specifically, what the oils in this blend target are the amygdala and the hypothalamus. And so the limbic system, like I said, it's incredibly responsive to aroma. So when if I say something like apple pie, you probably immediately have an emotional memory of some sort that's related to apple pie. For me, it would be my grandma's house. Okay. So that oil blend is really designed to be fast acting in terms of, again, leveling off the serotonin, leveling off the GABA, helping them to do their job, whether that is increasing or decreasing it. Usually we need to increase it. So that's going to be great for diffusing. The touch roller, it's kind of designed to linger a little bit through topical application because of the fractionated coconut oil. It's going to stay on your skin so you can smell it on your skin. So if you can't have a diffuser with you, that topical application is going to be really, really helpful. So you're going to not only get those aromatic benefits, you can put it on your hands, you can put it on your wrist there, on your neck, on your shoulders, right at the base of the skull, behind your ears. Those are all going to be great places. Right here in the pocket of your elbow is another great place to just kind of get those aromatic benefits. But you're also going to see it from that topical standpoint because of the fractionated coconut oil. It'll linger for just a little bit. You could also drip it on like diffuser jewelry. So I have, oh, I didn't wear them today. So I have it's not suede, it's like a leather type of earrings, and I can drip my oils on it, and then I can kind of smell them all day long. Or you can have bracelets or lava beads, and different types of diffusing jewelry is another great way to kind of use the adaptive throughout the day. The supplement then is really designed to provide that systemic support. So it's not only going to affect the neurological, so the limbic system with the scent, but also the biochemical aspects long term. This is something that you would take once a day just as a general kind of overall mental wellness kind of regimen. Some people do need to take 2 times a day. It just kind of depends on what kinds of things that you're dealing with or how deep those emotions are that you are experiencing. So we're seeing some really incredible success stories with this adaptive. I've got mamas who have their kiddos that have been on different types of medications for ADHD, anxiety disorders, Asperger's, all kind of all along the autism spectrum, just feeling like they finally have hope because they can help their kiddos feel calm, help them to be able to focus on homework, help them to not feel like they need to move around every 20 minutes. Okay, so it just is really helping the kiddos live a normal life without the side effects that can come from some of the pharmaceutical medications that would be prescribed in those instances. I've seen some people letting go of antidepressants that they have been on for years. Now, of course, I use this with caution, or I would recommend this with caution. You don't just want to stop using something that you've been using for years and start using adaptive. Use them together for a while and then slowly wean yourself off, or try to wean yourself off. Some people may not be able to fully wean themselves off. Just depends on your individual chemistry and what's going on. There was a woman on the way home from Utah when this actually is when this oil was first released. She was really upset at the flight attendant on her flight because she was so nervous. She hated flying, and the flight attendant wouldn't serve her alcohol on the ground. There's like an FDA, or not an FDA, what is it, the federal, whatever it is that deals with the flights. I can't think of it what they are right now. Federal transportation. Anyways, they have a rule or a law that you can't serve alcohol on the ground. It can only be served in the air. And so the woman was like super upset. And so I shared the roller with her, and she actually slept the entire 2.5-hour flight. And she's now been using adaptive daily. So it really, she's talked about how it's increased her quality of life, because she would get really nervous and stressed in certain situations. So people who have been on just different medications, including other GABA supplements, with some little to no success, having kiddos who haven't needed their prescriptions anymore, sitting through church services for the first time, getting through school days. There's some really great results as a result of just this adaptive system. So I spend so much time talking about it because I'm just super thrilled that we have it, and it's relatively new. So what I want to do now is just show you how you can get these into your homes. 2 ways that you can. The first is by paying retail. I don't recommend that you do this because you're going to pay more, and you don't get access to some of our resources. So I always recommend people go for the wholesale membership because you get a better deal with that. Our membership works just like a Costco or a Sam's Club membership. You get to order what you want and when you want to. There's no selling required, no monthly required or minimum orders that you have to have. We do have a loyalty program that you can opt into if you want to. That's a monthly order, but it's something that you get to decide whether or not you want to do. You can get started with a membership for as little as $35, which is basically your membership fee for 1 year. And with that wholesale membership, you get to purchase all of your products at wholesale prices, which is 25% below the retail price. With that membership, you also get plugged into all of our resources, where we have just exclusive members only training and events. We have resource pages that you can go in and ask questions about different oil problems that you might, or different problems that you might be having, and how you can use your oils for that. And then we also have a great shipping rewards program where you get your shipping costs back in product points to spend on free oils. And then that loyalty program that I mentioned, where you can earn more points for your regular orders if you decide that you want to do that. You can also opt to purchase one of our starter kits. So with these, that $35 fee is waived. And these are basically just collections of our most common products. So this is one, the Healthy Habits Kit. This is one that I recommend for people who are struggling with mood, with emotions, any kind of chronic mental wellness related issues. The reason why is because these supplements and these oils provide just a really strong foundation for your body's biochemistry. Remember, emotions are simply a part of your overall body chemistry. So we can balance things out more, we don't have the same troubles with emotional concerns. So I love this Healthy Habits Kit. And then I would also recommend adding on the adaptive system for just a complete approach to mental wellness biologically. Another option is our Simple Solutions Kit with that adaptive system added on. It's got, again, some of our most popular products. I kind of think of this as the Healthy Habits Kit Lite because it also helps to provide that really strong foundation from a wellness standpoint. It just doesn't have the supplements, and the supplements are going to give you like an added benefit. But it does have a lot of the similar oils that you're going to see in that Healthy Habits Kit. And then, of course, we have some other kits that have full-sized bottles or other products. What you want to do is just connect with the person who invited you tonight to find the one that's the best fit for you, as well as your needs and your budget. If you were invited by me or you came through the Essentially His Wisdom page, feel free to take a look at the starter kits on essentiallyhiswisdom.com. Contact me and I can help you get started. I do recommend that you connect with whoever invited you, though, about our current promotions so that you know exactly what's going on. Now, I also know that there are some people who are just not quite ready to pull the trigger. So I want to make sure to let you know about a very low risk, I want to give this a try option that I have for you. It's a challenge that's called Spoil Yourself, and it's just an online challenge where you can get an idea of the kind of education, kind of like I've given tonight, but the type of education that I provide for my team, and then also try some of our most common products. Several of them are related to stress, including the adaptive products that we talked about today. So you can actually register for this at the website that you see on your screen, just www.essentiallyhiswisdom.com/spoil yourself, all one word, and you can take yourself through that challenge. And I've set it up in such a way that you can either slowly work through it yourself little by little. You can binge watch it if you would like, but basically once you register, you'll have immediate access to the content, and then your products to sample will be mailed to you within a week. And that's just $25 to try that and just kind of see, is this something that'll work for me? Is this something that I want to do with my family? It's a really nice kind of low risk way to give these a try and see if they are a good fit for you. So I just want to thank you for coming tonight. I can't wait to help you all along your oil journey and hopefully invite you in and embrace you as a part of my team. We have a lot of fun. We provide a lot of great education to help you use your oil safely and get the maximum benefit out of them. So if you have any questions, be sure to connect with me. I'd be happy to answer them. And I hope that you guys have a really awesome night. We'll see you later.